Good morning and welcome to Coffee on the Coast. I am your host this morning, Tina Prigge. I'm really excited about this special episode of Coffee on the Coast because I am joined by a native Wisconsin author who wrote a book called Among the Badgers. And this is all about Abraham Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, and their adventures and experiences in Wisconsin. So please welcome to the show, author Stephen Rogstad. Stephen, it's so good to see you this morning.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you and all your followers today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And before we really get into it, let's tell people that you're actually going to be in Manitowoc tomorrow. So on Saturday, June 19th, author Stephen Rogstad is going to be at LaDeDa Books, that's at 1624 New York Avenue, from 10:30 to 12 for a book signing. So everything that you hear today that fascinates you, definitely stop down at LaDeDa tomorrow to meet the author in person, to get your book signed. It's going to be pretty cool. So let's tell people we are talking about. Let me introduce you first, Stephen. I think just saying you're an author isn't complete enough. So you're a Racine, Wisconsin native. You are nationally known for your scholarship in Lincoln Studies. You served as secretary and editor for the Lincoln Fellowship of Wisconsin and review editor for the Lincoln Herald. In 2008, you were appointed secretary of the Wisconsin Lincoln Bicentennial Commission by Governor Jim Doyle, and you served on the commission's Markers and Memorials Committee. You've edited and introduced several volumes, authored numerous articles and reviews, coordinated restoration projects for Lincoln Statuary in Wisconsin, and delivered dedicatory addresses for Lincoln monuments in Racine and Burlington. You're the former board chair for Racine Heritage Museum and past board president for Preservation Racine. Holy smokes, Stephen! That's quite a nice background there.
Well, so I appreciate it. Now I understand why I'm tired,
So you have spent a lifetime interested in Lincoln, and it has resulted in this book, Among the Badgers. Tell us how your interest in Lincoln started, and then how you ended up with this book.
Oh boy. Well, I was first introduced to Lincoln when I was 6 years old. My parents took me down to Springfield, Illinois. It was going to be, a typical family little visit to Springfield, and I still have the Polaroid pictures from those days of me going into the Lincoln House and standing in front of statues. And I was 6, and I remember thinking at that time I was just gravitated to him. And then 3 years later, we had a substitute teacher. I was in 4th grade. We had a substitute teacher on Lincoln's birthday, and they didn't know what to do with the class. This teacher didn't. And so she pulled out the Encyclopedia Britannica. That was the big one. That was the one nobody wanted to touch. You always wanted World Book. You never wanted to get the Britannica because it was just too much to read. And she pulled out the Britannica and reading the entire entry for Abraham Lincoln to the class. And I remember sitting there and looking around, and everybody was sleeping and bored out of their mind. And I was thinking, this just has to be the most fascinating thing I've ever read and or heard. And I started buying my books in school, paperback books, which you could afford or get through Scholastic Services, which was in the elementary schools at that time. So I was reading The Day Lincoln Was Shot and The Man Who Killed Lincoln. I thought, ooh, this is good stuff. And yeah, it was all there at the beginning between the ages of 6 and 9.
And that passion has continued. And now, last year, you released this book, Lincoln Among the Badgers, Rediscovering Sites Associated with Abraham and Mary Lincoln in Wisconsin. So tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, I've always wanted to write my own book. And the one thing that you'll notice if you read Lincoln biography is that Abraham Lincoln's visits to Wisconsin just never make it into biography. You can read the 1 volumes. You will not find him other than saying that he might have gotten into Wisconsin during the Black Hawk War. And even now, I went and did a survey when he spoke to Milwaukee at the State Fair. They don't even include the fact that he was there and gave the only speech on agriculture. That has now disappeared from Lincoln biography. Mary Lincoln's trips to Wisconsin in 1867 and 1872 in Racine and Waukesha, respectfully, are not adequately covered in Mary's biography. And this book that I put out I guess my sole bragging right would be, it's the very first book that has been published on Abraham Lincoln in Wisconsin that focuses just on the Lincolns in Wisconsin. So he is the second most written about figure in human history. He is second to Jesus Christ. And yet all of these Wisconsin related incidents have never really been brought together in book form until now.
You know,
So
that's fascinating. I had no idea that they had enough visits to Wisconsin that there would be a book. And show us the book, because we're not talking about just a little tiny pamphlet. You've got like a 400 page.
I have to tell you, it came out to 384 pages, just shy of 400 pages. And, you know, there's beautiful covers. It's highly illustrative. And so if you like, I think of it as a coffee table book, a history book, and a travel book, all rolled up into one. And I was fortunate enough to find an artist. Quite by accident, I came upon him at Cherry Fest in Door County, who was selling his art. And I asked him, could I use that in my book? And oh, he was thrilled. He had no idea it was going to be on the cover.
Oh, that's awesome. So that's cool that the artist is also a Wisconsin artist.
Oh, yes, he's out of Oconto. And there's two paintings of his that's in the book. And I've used both of them. And one on the cover and one in the book to start a section. So everything in this book is Wisconsin. I've used illustrations and paintings that are in Wisconsin or were painted by Wisconsin authors through the years. The covers are Wisconsin, and the stories are Wisconsin. And it's a Lincoln book. Lincoln and Mary Lincoln are the thread. They're the thread through this book. But to me, the real fascinating parts of this book is that I think I'm always writing about these really wonderful visionaries of Wisconsin. They're average people that wanted to put up a statue, or they wanted to commemorate a building, or they wanted, you know, to do something Lincoln-esque for their community. And this book is as much about these people and all these wonderful things that they did. These stories are phenomenal. You couldn't make this stuff up if you tried on some of these stories. And so it's really about people like you and me that interacted with the Lincolns and you know, how they remembered the Lincolns. You know?
And it's interesting because you mentioned it as sort of a travel book. So you've got incidents happening all around the state, and it sounds like as you read about them, a person with interest could even themselves travel to these different locations to see the statues, to see the markers, to see the memorials.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've actually put in a map with everything plotted, and then the table of contents has all the sites by city. So if you're in northern Wisconsin, you can see this. If you're in central Wisconsin, you can go see this. And then here are all the things in south Wisconsin, and they're all plotted. So if you want to take a day trip, you want to put the kids in the car, or maybe you just want to go and have something to do for a day, you can get in your car, bring the book with. And then when you're at these sites and everything, you know, you can sit there and talk about it and read about it and say, well, this is where that happened. We're standing in the place where this happened. Isn't that cool? It's cool.
Yeah, put yourself in a moment in history. And I think moments of history that a lot of us are probably unaware of. And I just want to say, you said bring the book along. Let's just mention one more time that tomorrow, Stephen is going to be at LaDeDa Books here in Manitowoc for a book signing. So you can, it's a perfect time to pick up your own copy, to meet the author, have him sign it, so that when you adventure around the state on your own, you'll have a pretty precious memento to take with you. And,
I'm looking forward to it.
Speaking of Wisconsin, there's a pretty cool review on your book from another Wisconsin and Manitowoc icon, Carrie Trask. I'm just going to put this up because Dr. Trask says, Lincoln Among the Badgers is a delightfully unusual book full of stories and images which are amusing, disturbing, informative, and sometimes downright weird. All reveal things few of us ever knew or could hardly imagine about the Lincolns and Wisconsin and their impacts on one another. So I think that's a really resoundingly cool review. And so it's interesting because it goes from amusing to informative to downright weird. Give us an idea of what Carrie Trask might be talking about.
Well, I think when he uses the word informative, that would be the whole book. disturbing. Well, we have a pallbearer of all things. There was only 21 elected that could touch Abraham Lincoln's casket. Only 21. They were all Reserve Corps in Washington, D.C. And one of them was from Manitowoc. And he followed the casket from Washington for about 2 weeks, and was on the funeral train, was in the middle of all those pictures that you see the soldiers besides these catafalques in all these cities. And we don't know how often he was marching beside the catafalque or he was guarding the train, and they probably took turns with duties, but he was one of 21 men in the United States that was allowed to touch that casket, and he is buried in Manitowoc. And so, the other one is William Cockshaw out of Beaver Dam was the hangman, one of the prop knockers for Mary Surratt, the first woman hung by the federal government in the Lincoln assassination. And he's buried in Beaver Dam. So you can go to his grave just like you can go to William Noble's grave in Manitowoc, and they're both attached to the Lincoln assassination. So you got some disturbing images there with Cockshaw hanging Mary Surratt, maybe disturbing or depressing thinking of Noble touching and carrying Lincoln's casket. But then you have weird, like Abraham Lincoln showing up as a fiberglass statue along with George Washington next to Jesus Christ at the shrine of the Virgin Mary in LaDeDa, or him on the world's largest penny out of woodruff, or a kind of a folk art replica of the Abraham Lincoln, Mary Lincoln statue in Racine that's made out of glass and bottle caps and all sorts of things in Phillips, Wisconsin. So yeah, we've got good stuff, disturbing stuff, and weird stuff. And I think that's what Carrie was alluding to.
That's awesome. And all of those like different statues and things that you just mentioned, those still exist around the state, right? As people read the book, those are places they could go visit.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In this book, there's 31 chapters to the book. There's 31 places you can go. 5 of them are graves of people that interacted with the Lincolns in some profound. But they're all plaques, markers that commemorate buildings that the Lincolns were in. And we still have a building in Beloit that he spoke in, the William Tallman home in Janesville that he slept in. Mary Lincoln, we have the grounds of Racine College in Racine, where she actually was in the chapel and wrote about being in that chapel during a choir rehearsal. And we don't really have anything left of her visit to Waukesha, but we have some remarkable things. And we have 9 heroic statues to the Lincolns in the state. And they all have their own unique story and history behind them. One of the stories I was saving it to the last because I thought it was going to be just the worst thing I was going to have to write about, just another bland history about this statue in Kenosha in Library Park. Boy, was I mistaken. It turned out to be one of the favorite essays of mine to write, and it has such a bizarre tale behind it that when I got done writing it, I thought, boy, I really like this story, and so I can honestly say I don't think there's a boring story in the whole book, not because I wrote it, because the background stories behind these things were that interesting and unique.
Well, and I like what you said to me offline as well, Stephen, that, writing a book is not just how you speak. It is truly a craft. And so you definitely approached it by wanting people to be engaged and wanting people to read on to the next. I think that makes it sound pretty exciting and valuable as well.
Yeah, well, I had an idea of how I wanted the book to look. It had to be highly illustrative. I'm always writing for people that may not know anything about Lincoln. So if there's any of you out there that are saying, I don't know anything about Lincoln, this might be too deep for me or anything. No, not at all. You're exactly the person that I'm trying to write for. I didn't know anything about Lincoln at 6 years of age, but boy, in the last 6 years, I've learned a lot. You don't have to have as much of an interest in Lincoln as I have. But these are really unique stories, and they're not so much Lincoln stories, and the thread that runs through them, as Mrs. Lincoln is as well. But it's really about these fascinating Wisconsinites that did unusual or memorable things to commemorate Lincoln, just out of personal affection for him. They wanted their community to have a Lincoln statue, and all of these people were just I got to feel like I almost understood some of them, and I wish they were alive because I'd like to see them. They were really fascinating characters.
Oh, it sounds awesome. I'm just going to put up a picture of the book again. So this is Lincoln Among the Badgers, Rediscovering Sites Associated with Abraham and Mary Lincoln in Wisconsin by author Stephen Rogstad. It is available. Stephen is going to be in Manitowoc tomorrow for a book signing at LaDeDa if you'd like to pick up your own copy and get it signed. What's cool is Stephen is a Wisconsin native. The art on the cover of this book is by a Wisconsin artist, and it is all about these fascinating stories of the Lincolns intertwined with Wisconsin. Yeah. And go ahead. I just wanted to put this up while we're talking so people have the address and everything in the time for.
No, I'm looking forward to seeing. I'm looking forward to seeing the people in Manitowoc tomorrow. We've been looking forward to this for a while. We were thinking about doing this last fall, but with the pandemic and everything, so we're hoping that Bev over at LaDeDa is going to get a really good response to this. And I'm so happy to be in Manitowoc because our mutual good friend Carrie Trask, he's going to be there. So even if you don't want to come and see me, come and see Carrie. He's more fascinating than I am, let me tell you.
So when you're in Manitowoc, are you going to take a picture up by the Lincoln statue at Lincoln High School?
Well, you know, that statue's in the book. The statue is
no kidding.
Well, yes, it's one of the 9 statues in the state. So, and it is probably the shortest essay in the book because if you can imagine, neither the school nor the library nor anybody associated with that statue saved any records. We know very little, enough to write about it, but that is probably the shortest essay in the book, but it's a wonderful statue put up in 1961. And again, it was put up by a graduating class simply because they thought that a Lincoln school should have a Lincoln statue. And that in and of itself, you know, is a great story. I didn't realize
Manitowoc was in the book. I probably should have led with that not only do we have a Wisconsin author, but Manitowoc is actually in this book. How cool.
Manitowoc is in the book for the statue and for William Henry Noble, who was the pallbearer in the Lincoln funeral, and he's buried in Manitowoc. So, and ended up having quite an illustrious career. And just to talk about William Henry Noble, you know, we talk about the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he was awarded, those 21 people were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. At the time, they called it the Medal of Honor. And unfortunately, in the early 1900s, those 21 men were stripped of their medals and their names were taken off as recipients because the government felt they started diluting and awarding people who it was supposed to be for bravery and merit in combat. And they felt that they had diluted it by giving it to people for heroic things, but not heroic action in battle. And so they went, and I know the numbers in the book, but I'm going to say I think they stripped 900 people of their medals, and William Henry Noble and 21 of them were those that were no longer stripped. They didn't confiscate the medals. William Henry Noble was able to retain his medal, but he was always proud of the fact that he was a pallbearer in Lincoln's funeral, and which kept his uniform and kept his medal. It's still in existence.
Wow. Okay, so that definitely factors into, you know, informative, kind of weird, amusing. So this sounds like a great book. I really appreciate you coming on Coffee on the Coast to talk to us about it. You know, you're going to be in Manitowoc tomorrow. Welcome to Manitowoc. I hope that people come out to see you at LaDeDa Books from 10:30 to 12. And we were just talking too that this is Father's Day weekend. And in case you're looking for a last minute gift, I really can't think of what could be better than this beautifully illustrated, informatively and interestingly written book. I know I am looking forward to picking up a copy. And I just wanted to say thank you and safe travels. And safe travels as you know, to viewers who travel around the state, checking out all of these fascinating sites. And
I appreciate being here on your program. You know, again, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about the book. And like I tell everybody sometimes, when I inscribe it, I say enjoy, but visit the sites.
Yeah, that's great. That is awesome. All right, everyone, take care. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of Coffee on the Coast.
Thank you.